More turds in the punch bowl.
One of the main concerns that firms have is there's not enough demand. There's not enough people coming and demanding their products. And if people feel that their financial situation is better because their 401k looks better for whatever reason, their house is worth more, they're more willing to go out and spend, and that's going to provide the demand that firms need in order to be willing to hire and to invest. But I'd first describe the economic conditions that motivated the committee's decision to take additional actions. First, the committee will closely monitor incoming information on economic and financial developments in coming months. And if we do not see substantial improvement in the outlook for the labor market, we will continue the MBS purchase program, undertake additional asset purchases, and employ our policy tools as appropriate until we do.
Maybe in layman's terms, this is one part of the government lending another part of the government money, which would not lead to long-term confidence once the American people understood the basics a little bit better.
Well, it should be added that we also have a funding cost, and as interest rates go up, we'll have a liability cost as well as an asset cost, so it may or may not be a return to the Treasury. Liability cost as well as an asset cost, so it may or may not be a return to the Treasury. Monetary policy, even in the most normal times, as the CRS says, involves buying and selling Treasury securities. We couldn't have currency outstanding if we didn't have securities to back them up.
Although I would say we had a currency for many parts of our history without any federal debt.
When was that?
Under the Jackson administration.
So this was before the Civil War. This was right. This was during the period of where individual banks issued currency. We didn't have a national currency.
I just might say that it's possible for a country to have a currency without a $1 trillion debt.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And one of the entries on the balance sheet is under assets, central bank liquidity swaps, which shows an increase from the end of 2007 from $24 billion to $553 billion in change at the end of 2008. What's that?
Those are swaps that were done with foreign central banks. Many foreign banks are short dollars. And so they come into our markets looking for dollars and drive up interest rates and create volatility in our markets. What we have done is, with a number of major central banks, like the European Central Bank, for example, we swap our currency, dollars, for their currency, euros. They take the dollars, lend it out to the banks in their jurisdiction. That helps bring down interest rates in the global market for dollars. And meanwhile, we're not lending to those banks. We're lending to the central bank. The central bank is responsible for repaying us.
So who got the money?
To financial institutions in Europe and other countries.
Which ones?
I don't know.
Well, look at the next page. The very next page has the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate, which shows a 20% increase in the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate at exactly the same time that you were handing out $500 billion. Do you think that's a coincidence?
Yes.
Higher gross national product of this country is well under $500 billion, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Is it safe to say that nobody in 1913 contemplated that your small little group of people would decide to hand out $500 billion to foreigners?
This particular authority has been used numerous times over the years.
Well, actually, according to the chart on page 28, Virtually the entire amount that's reflected in your current balance sheet went out starting in the last quarter of 2007. And before that, going back to the beginning of this chart, the amount of lending was zero to foreigners. Is that
it was zero before the crisis? Yeah, this was part of the process, working with other central banks to again to try to get dollar money markets working normally in the global economy.
All right, my time is very limited.
Gentlemen's time is expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bernanke, if you don't mind, would you tell me whether or not you do your own shopping at the grocery store?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so you're aware of the prices. But, you know, this argument that prices are going up about 2%, nobody believes it. You know, and the old CPI says prices are going up at 9%. They believe this. And people on fixed incomes, they're really hurting. The middle class is really hurting because their inflation rate is very much higher than the government tries to tell them. And that's why they lose trust in government. But you know, this whole idea about prices and debasement of currency, if you loan me $100 and in 2 years from now I gave you 90 back, you'd be pretty upset. But we hand back money back that's worth 10 or 15 or 20% less, and nobody seems to be able to do anything about it. But it's very upsetting. But it's theft. If I don't give you your full $100 back, if you loan me $100, I'm stealing $10 from you. So somebody's stealing wealth, and this is very upsetting. You said that you sort of poked a little bit of fun at people to downplay the 2% inflation rate. But if you say it's 2 and I say it's 9, it's compromised for the sake of argument that it's 5%. That you said that if it doesn't hurt you unless you're one of those people who stick the money in the mattress. But where are you going to put it? Are you going to put it in a CD and not make any money at all? So this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't encourage the savings, and it just discourages people. I have, over the years, obviously been critical of what goes on monetary policy. It's a flawed system, and therefore we shouldn't expect good results, and generally we are not getting results. Policies never change. We stay the same thing. No matter what crisis is, we still do more of the same. If spending and debt was the problem, spending more and in greater debt and have the Fed just buy more debt doesn't seem to help at all. And here we are doing the same thing. We don't talk about the work ethic and true productions and true savings and why this excessive debt is so bad for us. We talk about solving a worldwide problem of insolvency of nations, including our own, by just printing money, creating credit. And now the Fed, in the last 4 years, tripled the monetary base, and it has $1 trillion more money sitting there. The banks are sitting with trillions of dollars. And just the creation of money doesn't restore the confidence that is necessary. And until we get to the bottom of this and restore the confidence, I don't think we're going to see economic growth. If it's allowed to be done in secret, this is the reason why I want to work within the system. What I want to say is Congress ought to get a backbone. They ought to say we deserve to know, we have a right to know, we have an obligation to know, because we have an obligation to defend our currency. It's the destruction of the currency that destroys the middle class. There is a principle in free market banking that says if you destroy the value of currency through inflation, you transfer the wealth from the middle class and it gravitates to the very wealthy. The bankers, the government, the politicians, they all love this. It is the fact that the Federal Reserve is the facilitator. But you couldn't have big government. If everybody loves big government, love the Fed, because they can finance the wars and all the welfare you want. But it doesn't work. It eventually ends up in a crisis. And it's a solvency crisis, and it can't be solved by printing a whole lot of money. So I think the very first step is transparency. And for us to know, we have a right to know. And you may be correct in your assumption, at least I'm sure you believe this, but maybe I should be talking to the Congress. That we should stand up and say, yes, we demand to know. Trillions and trillions of dollars being printed out of thin air and bailing out their friends. They stand ready to do it. The crisis is just, as far as I'm concerned, my opinion is it's in the early stages. It's far from over. We're in deep doldrums, and we never change policy. We never challenge anything. We just keep doing the same thing. Congress keeps spending the money. Welfare expands exponentially. Wars never end. And deficits don't matter. And when it comes to cutting spending, Republicans and Democrats to get together and say, oh no, we can't really cut. The prices soared up. Everybody knows there was a bubble, and then they collapsed. When those prices of houses collapse, do you call that deflation?
No. Deflation is prices of current goods and services. So inflation doesn't capture house prices. It includes the house of the rental.
Okay, and I think one of the problems, even getting a full-fledged discussion out, is sometimes the definition of words about what inflation and deflation means. Because as far as I'm concerned, deflation is when the money supply shrinks, and inflation is when the money supply expands.
Will, as always, take appropriate account of the inflation outlook and of their efficacy and costs.
But just about everybody in the country, especially the financial markets, and the way I think the conventional use of inflation is the CPI. And I think it's, a lousy measurement. Because if it's the money supply increase, if prices going down of houses is not deflation, wonder why it is that inflation is measured by the CPI going up rather than the money supply going up. Our argument is that once you distort interest rates and increase the supply of money, you end up with this gross distortion that is demanding some correction. We've had this for 5 years and we're still in a mess. Is there ever a time, let's say we go 5 more years and we have the same problems but much worse, is there ever a time you might say, I have to reassess my philosophy on monetary policy? Or do you think it'll be the same no matter what kind of crisis? Can you foresee any kind of problem that we would have that you would reassess your assumptions?
I can't conjecture what specifically, but of course, yeah, I'm evidence-based. I look and see what happens and try to draw conclusions from that. Certainly.
The definitions, obviously, to me are, very, very important. And if we don't come to this conclusion and we use these terms, inflation demands corrections, and the market wants to correct. So this is why we believe that we're going to have perpetual doldrums and finally have a big one. Do you consider this recession that we're facing today something that is significantly different since 1945? Much worse and different in any way?
Yes, because of the financial crisis, yes.
Thank you.
To make a point about prices, because prices go up. That, to me, is not the inflation. It is one of the bad consequences of the inflation, which comes from the increase in the money supply. And that's one of the bad effects. But, you took over the Fed in 2006. I have a silver ounce here. And this ounce of silver back in 2006 would buy over 4 gallons of gasoline. Today, it'll buy almost 11 gallons of gasoline. That's preservation of value, and that's what the market has always said should be money. Money comes into effect in a natural way, not in an edict, not by fiat, by governments declaring it is money. Why is it that we can't consider, the two of us, an option? You love paper money. I think money should be honest, constitutional, still on the books, gold and silver, legal tender. Why don't we use it? But why don't we allow currencies to run parallel? They do around the world. One of my options, as much as I would like to do something with the Fed, I say the Fed's going to self-destruct eventually anyway when the money's gone. But why wouldn't we legalize competing currencies? Why couldn't people put this in a mattress and get 4 or 5 times much of the value in a few years? So the record of what you've done in the last 6 years is destroy the value of real money, of paper money. At the same time, real money is preserved. But a competing currency, we already have a silver eagle. It's legal tender for $1. And some people say, well, it's legal tender, it's $1, it's on the books, and they use it, and they get into big trouble. The government comes and closes them down, and you can get arrested for that. But what would be wrong with talking about parallel currency and competing currencies?
First of all, good to see you again, Congressman Paul. Just one word on the inflation. Of course, those numbers are constructed by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, not by the Fed. They're independently constructed, and I think they're done in a very serious and thoughtful way. On alternative currencies, nobody prevents you from holding silver or gold if you want to. It's perfectly legal to do that. And you're also it's also perfectly fine to hold other currencies, euros or yen or whatever else. So in that respect, you can do that, and I'd be happy to talk to you about.
But Mr. Chairman, that's not money. I mean, when you pay taxes to buy a coin, or you have capital gains tax, when it's not, if you have to settle a lawsuit, it's always settled in depreciating Federal Reserve notes. It's never settled in the real contract. So that's nothing near money when it's illegal to use it. But to do it, you'd have to repeal the legal tender laws. You would have to legalize this. You'd have to get rid of the sales taxes. You'd have to get rid of the capital gains taxes. People, even in Mexico, they're talking about this. They're trying to have competing currencies. They've been wiped out too many times with inflation and wipe out the middle class. They're allowing people to start to save in a silver currency. So I hope we move along in that direction, because there shouldn't be any overwhelming changes all of a sudden, that there could be a transition. People could vote on it. Maybe they'll give up on the Federal Reserve note and vote for real money.
I'd be very happy to talk to you about it.
Thank you very much.
But my question is related to the overall policy. Spending all this money hasn't helped, and yet many allies that would endorse so much of what's been going on, whether it's the Fed or the Congress, they recognize that consumer spending is very, very important, and they concentrate on that. But the $5.1 trillion didn't go to the consumers. It went to buying bad assets. It went to bailing out banks. It went to bailing out big companies. And lo and behold, the consumer didn't end up getting this. They lost their job, and they lost their houses and mortgages, and they're still in trouble. But my question is, if you took that $5.1 trillion and said that consumer spending is good, you could have given every single person in this country $17,000. Why is it the program of both the Congress and the Fed to direct the money to the people who have been making a lot of money, instead to the people who, if you argue that the consumer needs to spend the money, I obviously don't advocate this, but I would suggest, maybe it could have worked better. It couldn't have worked any worse. But what is the reason we direct it toward the banks and the big corporations, too big to fail, and we don't pay that much attention to the consumer, if it's true, and I don't know if you agree with that or not, that consumer spending is an important issue?
Well, it is an important issue, Congressman. But you're mistaken in saying that the Federal Reserve has spent any money. You say $5 trillion. We have lent money. We have purchased securities. That's not buying. That's not dissipating. The money. We've gotten all the money back. As an article over the weekend by Alan Sloan showed, in fact, the Fed has been a major profit center for the U.S. government. We've turned over profits in the last 2 years of $125 billion. So we are not costing any money in terms of budget deficits or anything like that. In terms of what we were trying to do, of course, the reason the Federal Reserve was founded a century ago was to try to address the problems arising from financial panics, which did, by the way, occur in an unregulated environment in the 19th century. We provided liquidity and short-term loans to help financial systems stabilize. We did that not because we particularly care about the managers or the shareholders of financial firms.
I hate to interrupt, but my time is about up.
Certainly.
But I would like to suggest that you say it's not spending money. Well, it's money out of thin air. You put it into the market, and you hold assets, and the assets aren't, they are diminishing in value when you buy up bad assets. But very quickly, if you could answer another question, because I'm curious about this. The price of gold today is $1,580. The dollar during these last 3 years was devalued almost 50%. When you wake up in the morning, do you care about the price of gold?
Well, I pay attention to the price of gold, but I think it reflects a lot of things. It reflects global uncertainties. I think the reason people hold gold is as a protection against what we call tail risk, really, really bad outcomes. And to the extent that the last few years have made people more worried about the potential of a major crisis, then they have gold as a protection.
Do you think gold is money?
No.
It's not money. Even if it has been money for 6,000 years, somebody reversed that and eliminated that economic law.
Well, it's an asset. I mean, it's the same. Would you say Treasury bills are money? I don't think they're money either, but they're a financial asset.
Why do central banks hold it?
Well, it's a form of reserves.
Why don't they hold diamonds?
Well, it's tradition, long-term tradition.
Some people still think it's money. I yield back my time.
To help bolster the recovery and promote price stability, the FOMC has provided unprecedented levels of policy accommodation in recent years. With inflation anticipated to run at or below our 2% objectives, the committee has become convinced that further policy accommodation is warranted to strengthen the recovery and support the gains we've begun to see in housing and other sectors. Specifically, the committee decided to purchase additional agency mortgage-backed securities, or MBS, at a pace of $40 billion per month. The program of MBS purchases should increase the downward pressure on long-term interest rates more generally, but also on mortgage rates specifically, which should provide further support for the housing sector by encouraging home purchases and refinancing. And if we do not see substantial improvement in the outlook for the labor market, we will continue the MBS purchase program, undertake additional asset purchases, and employ our policy tools as appropriate until we do. We will, as always, take appropriate account of the inflation outlook and of their efficacy and costs. FOMC participants see an economic outlook that remains uncertain. This is not going to be a kind of world in which an unskilled worker is going to do well.
This is not going to be a kind of world in which an unskilled worker is going to do well.
That was a double dose you got. So that was pleasantly unexpected, I guess.
This is Brandon Holsey, and I just wanted to thank you for watching. And please like, comment, subscribe, share, and empower. Peace.